All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Madison Jazz Festival. This is a special online event that we have that's part of our new Madison Jazz Festival. My name is Nick Moran. I'll be your host and one of the guests of this talk. Before we get to this great information, before I introduce our very special guest, please allow me to tell you a little bit about this festival and also to thank people that are making this possible. So first, I want to thank the Arts and Literature Laboratory for making this event possible. We also want to thank the Wisconsin Union Theater and our, and our sponsor, our series sponsor, the Capital Times. We'd also like to thank the John and Carolyn Peterson Charitable Foundation, Dane Arts, the Madison Arts Commission, the Madison Jazz Society, Carlson Black, Strang Incorporated, Gebhardt Development, the UW Division of the Arts, 89.9 WORT, our community radio station, the Wisconsin Arts Board, the National Endowment for the Arts, Farley's House of Pianos, MG&E, with additional funds from the Andrus Manufacturing Company Foundation, the EVU Foundation Incorporated, the charitable arm of the Capital Times, the W. Jerome Frauchi Foundation, and the Pleasant T. Rowland Foundation. We'd also like to thank Union Cab for their support of transporting some of our special guest artists, as well as the Graduate Hotel for housing them as well. We'd like to thank a couple individuals that are making this festival possible. We'd like to thank Marcia McKenzie. We'd like to thank Jerry DiMaggio, Howard Landsman, Tony Sykes, and Gary Paulson for their fine support of this festival. Now, there are still events happening with the Madison Jazz Festival, even though we started on June 11th, and we're going to go all the way till June 20th, including tonight. We're actually coming live from the Garber Feed Mill, and later tonight, it's going to be Latin Jazz Night with the Acoplavas, with the show starting at 8 p.m., and tickets are still available for that. So if you want to just swing in after this talk, we'd love to see you. Tomorrow night, we're going to do another online event, a live stream, coming live from the Stoughton Opera House with the great vocalist Sarah M. Greer. And then Saturday night, we're going to have a huge culminating event on the Memorial Union Terrace with the great Marquise Hill and with Donna Woodall's group opening for him. And then Sunday night is kind of our prologue. At Cafe Coda, we have the great Roscoe Mitchell. So that's all the events, and you can find out all these events online at madisonjazzfestivalwi.org. And with all of that, I'd like to introduce our special guest. He is a man that I've had the pleasure of working with as a musician. He had one of the best clubs in Madison for decades, and also a true advocate and a community supporter. So at home, we can't hear you, but we could feel you. Put your hands together for the great Ricardo Gonzalez.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you very much.
So this talk, again, we're online here. This is interactive, so there is a chat on YouTube and Facebook. If you want to throw in some questions during this chat, we actually have some help, and they will be feeding us these questions as we go. But today, our talk is about a project that from an association that Ricardo started, and we'll talk a little bit about that, that was building bridges between musicians here in Madison, our community musicians here in Madison, and in Camagüey, Cuba, which is the third biggest city in Cuba. And this is a project we started in, 2015?
Right.
Yeah, but before we get into the actual project, we couldn't have done it without the great help of the Madison Camagüey Sister City Association. And that's something that Ricardo Gonzalez founded. So Ricardo, can you tell us a little bit about that organization?
Sure. The Madison Camagüey Sister City relationship began in 1994. That was the time when Cuba was undergoing what was called the special period following the collapse of the Soviet Union. And the situation down there was really very difficult for the Cuban people. At the same time that their economy had collapsed by over 50%, the United States Congress approved legislation to tighten the embargo against Cuba, which had been in place since 1962. So to say that it was a tough time is an understatement. When you talk to the Cubans who hear stories that are very difficult to believe, but it was at that time that I was an alderman in the city of Madison, and I was invited to participate in a conference in Havana, and I decided to go and took with me the idea of twinning Madison with Camagüey. Madison has always had a tradition of support for sister city projects. We have 9 or 10 sister cities all over the world, and we thought Camagüey would be a good fit. Not only it's a comparable size, it's the capital of the province. It's always been a center of communications, research, and also it's Cuba's dairyland.
Mhm.
So, and also Camagüey is a place that has that same attitude that Madison has. That we really like to believe in Madison that we are a beacon. And in Cuba, Camagüey has always been a place that believes itself to be a great place. And no wonder, Camagüey is the cradle of Cuban literature, for instance. Some of the best writers in Cuban history were born and raised there. And the first piece of Cuban literature was written there back in the 17th century. Camagüey is an old city. It's been established for 507, 508 years. So we thought, okay, let's get this relationship started and let's focus on humanitarian assistance because that's what they really needed at that time. They needed medical supplies, medical equipment, medicines. And we decided to connect with the pediatrics hospital there. So the relationship began on that basis. It continued for the first almost 10 years until the Bush administration tightened the screws again on the island and made it impossible for Americans to visit Cuba unless they were involved in religious work or truly humanitarian. And so that gave birth to the Wisconsin Medical Project. And they have led an effort that is really worthy of note because over the years, since 2004, the Medical Project has shipped around 20 containers, 40-foot containers.
Yeah, you're talking shipping containers.
Shipping containers. They are really organized in that sense, and they take delegations there to do needs assessments. In other words, the relationship is it's long. It's been established now for 27 years, and it has helped, I think, it has helped the Cuban people. We've had people from Camagüey come to visit us. Mm-hmm. But it was not until President Obama took office that we began to see the opportunity to expand the sister city relationship into more cultural exchanges. And in 2010, 2011, we began to look at possibilities, and we took some delegations there that visited environmental areas in the Camagüey province and in the eastern part. And then finally, in 2014, 2015, we began to think about why don't we take musicians to Camagüey and exchange with the Camagüey musicians. Already, the Madison Camagüey Association had been supporting and sponsoring a provincial concert band. So we had a relationship with musicians that went back to the year 2000. And that's when we came up with the plan to take Golpe Tierra. Golpe Tierra, Madison's own Afro-Peruvian ensemble, was the perfect group to open up because first of all, it was only 4 people that made the group.
Yeah,
but also it was small, and it was easy to move back. Going to Cuba, it's another story, and it's not easy to organize, but it's doable, and we had done that. But taking a group to perform in Cuba, that was a different story. And so lo and behold, we began the process, and we finally got the visas. In fact, the visas were not even there until we arrived in Camagüey. And but the bottom line is that Golpe Tierra performed, and they were warmly welcomed because it was something different. It wasn't Latin jazz, it was Afro-Peruvian jazz. Yeah. And the Cubans took note of that. They loved it. And of course, that led to another visit by Golpe Tierra in 2017.
And, just to back up just a little bit, for those who aren't familiar with Golpe Tierra, another, we are I'm one of the co-founders, but my brother from another mother, Richard Hildner, was also a co-founder. And a little bit of background on myself. You know, I grew up here in Madison. My father is Peruvian. I'm first generation Peruvian American, and Richard is the same, first generation Peruvian American. And we got to know each other as children, going to pretty much every summer, every end of July, we would go to the Peruvian Independence Day picnic that our parents would put together. When since then, the community has really grown. The Peruvian community here in Madison's grown. But back then, back in the early '80s, they were like the pioneers. Just a few people out there doing that. And Richard and I built that relationship of just playing Dungeons and Dragons together and hanging out. It wasn't until later when we were both musicians and we worked with the great Juan Medrano, Cotito, who actually came into town and played at the Cardinal Bar. Among other places, that he really schooled us in Afro-Peruvian rhythms, culture, and also the música criolla, the coastal music of Peru. And when Juan continued on with his touring, Richard and I kind of wanted to keep the project going. And so we used first a cajon player from Peru that I originally met at a jam session, but we also had a new arrival, Juan Martinez, who is not only a great cajon player but a great vocalist and songwriter. And the songwriting team between Richard and Juan is stellar. And so I think that was one of the connecting factors. We weren't not only just a band from Madison, we were a band from Madison that played Peruvian music, but also sang songs in Spanish. So
right.
we could connect with the people there in a different way. But yeah, and you know, I don't know if you mentioned it, Ricardo, but what's your connection with Cuba?
Well, I was born and raised in Camagüey, and I left Cuba in 1960 after the revolution had come to power, and my destiny would end up in Oklahoma, where I went to college, and then I came to Wisconsin, and of course, when I landed in Wisconsin, I was in Ripon, working for a canning company there, the Green Giant Company. And then after that, I came to live in Madison. So I've been in Madison since 1972 and opened the Cardinal Bar in 1974. And
we missed the Cardinal.
The Cardinal became a beacon in a way, because the Cardinal was the only place in Madison for a very long time that played Latin music, was the first place, in fact, to have Latin music available, and a whole cultural phenomenon really happened there. And of course, the Cardinal is history now, but who knows? There are rumors running around, but don't believe anything you hear.
Oh, man. One thing too, a little bit of background on my connection with Cuba is when Ricardo was explaining the special period, my father and I had an opportunity to travel to Cuba in '99, which was kind of at the end of that, or maybe in the middle. I don't really. I mean, it was definitely, you could feel the effect of that period.
'99 was still bad.
Yeah,
not as bad as '94.
But you know, we actually had an interesting Cuban connection that came through Madison. There is a great band called Sierra Maestra that are ambassadors of a style of Cuban music known as son. Son music is kind of the folk music of the eastern province of Cuba, and the mountain range that's in that that area is known as the Sierra Maestra. That's actually where the Cuban Revolution started as well. The first battles were fought in those mountains. But that group came through and played at the Club Tavern, of all places, in Middleton.
Yes.
And it was the same weekend. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. This is the story I tell, at least. It was the same weekend as the Rolling Stones being in town. Remember that?
Right. Yeah. Well, I was gone.
Oh, okay.
When Sierra Maestra came, it was in October 1997.
Yeah, something like that. Yep.
And I had gone to Texas to help my mother move to an assisted facility at that time, and it was the point is, I missed Sierra Maestra, and to this day people are still talking about that show.
Yeah, and that's one of those things where you just kind of like, you know, you have to check what's going on in the scene, because you could have missed something like that. And that band, maybe you're not familiar with Sierra Maestra, but you've probably heard of the Afro-Cuban All-Stars and the Buena Vista Social Club, and Juan de Marcos Gonzalez also the music director of both of those projects. This was before the Buena Vista Social Club record caught fire, caught all that fame, before the movie and everything. And they were looking for places to stay. And so a lot of those musicians actually stayed at my parents' house. And, we had a great time. We got their phone numbers. And when my father and I traveled to Cuba for the first time, we called up Juan de Marcos. And I was asking, I'm a bassist by training. I was asking who I could take bass lessons from. And, the stars aligned, and I was able to study with Orlando Cachayito Lopez, the great Cuban bassist of the Buena Vista Social Club and so many other projects in Havana.
And from a family of bassists.
Hopefully you've heard the Cachao name. Israel Lopez Cachao. One of him and his brother are some of the founders of Mambo in New York. And they are amazing musicians and songwriters. And Cachao's legacy is, he played until pretty much his dying day in his 80s, I believe. An amazing musician. And so that lineage is incredible. And so to be able to study with him and to continue to study with him the other times that I returned to Cuba it just changed me as a musician. I was a jazz musician first. And then after that, I really just started learning all I could about Cuban music. Fast forward I'm currently the music director of the Afro-Cuban Jazz Ensemble of UW-Madison. We have our own UW-Madison Afro-Cuban Jazz Ensemble. So I'm passing along a lot of the knowledge I've learned from the Cuban musicians. And in a way, I always felt, because they're so generous in Cuba with their time, with their knowledge, especially with their music, we can jam until all hours of the night, that I felt like there had to have been some way that I could pay the scene back a little bit with some of the work I could do. And in a way, when we could do this first project with Golpe Tierra, I was thinking that this could be something that we're building these bridges, we can make people aware of what Cuba is, what Cuban music is, and also what the musicians in our community here in Madison can do. And it's starting to pay that tab of all the knowledge that, I absorbed from my lessons of the Cuban musicians.
And maybe we should mention that as part of along with taking the group of the musicians to perform in Cuba, we always had a group of Madisonians that were the support team. And they also helped to finance the project because they contributed in the Madison Camagüey Sister City project. Of course, that's a not-for-profit organization. So we were able to raise the money and from the travelers themselves and make it happen. And we stayed in private houses on there, B&Bs. This is a concept that has been taking off in the last few years in Cuba.
And it's the best way to stay if you go to Cuba.
And it is the way to do it because you're staying with Cuban families and you're safe. And in Camagüey, of course, Camagüey is a walking city. You don't want to have a car. You don't want to have any. There's very little bus transportation. It's all bicycle taxis or even horse-drawn carriages. Or walking, and you get to do a lot of walking when you're down there, and people love that. We like to house our travelers in the old historic area, and there's architecture there that goes back to the 18th century. Most of the stuff before that didn't quite survive, but the 18th century, there's some significant pieces of architecture very near, like the Plaza San Juan de Dios, and the Plaza del Carmen. All of these are old areas of Camagüey, and that's part of the charm. That's part of the beauty of going there, and all the performances then that we had. And each and every one of those performances was well received, and that was the start. Because that was in 2015. We thought, okay, this is good, so let's do it again.
I'm going to share a photo of this is actually the second trip that Golpe Tierra took, but this is some of the musicians that, that's not it. These are some of the musicians that first came down with us. You can see we had our trio, our Golpe Tierra trio with Juan Martinez, Juan Tomás Martinez, my brother from another mother, Richard Hildner, myself, smiling, and on sax, Tony Barba, on woodwinds, actually, Tony Barba. We had Jacob Bickness come on drums, and we had another musician that was part of our traveling group, Amber Dolphin, who's a violinist in our community. And then this is Julio Santana, a great percussionist that's you'll see featured in some of the videos that we'll be showing in just a second. That was actually right next to the Casa Particular that we were staying in. And you can see this by the smiles on our faces that we were having a great time.
Well, and already that picture shows the exchange that begins to take place as we arrive there with a group of musicians and the locals become aware of it. Then this process of cultural exchange takes place. And that's what this is about. It's about musicians exchanging with their fellow musicians from there and learning from one another, playing music together and creating something beautiful and opening the way to more, because there's all these other contacts that take place at the same time. And the people, of course, the Madison, the support group that travels with us, they also make friends.
Yeah.
So this has been going on now for a long time. And we really have in Camagüey a little piece of Madison. There's so many friends over the years. And Nick, are you going to tell us a little bit more about some of the other projects that we did following that?
Yeah, but before we get to that, just one thing that really, I mean, the performances on our first few trips with Golpechera were just great. And, hearing especially the people reacting to Afro-Peruvian rhythms, and a lot of the Cuban audience, correct me if I'm wrong, but weren't familiar with a lot of this Afro-Peruvian stuff. But our lyrics, we talked about dancing and having a great time and some rum.
Some people down there hardly knew that there was an African presence in Peru. Mm-hmm. And in fact, most people outside of Peru and outside of a musical community don't know that there is such a thing as Afro-Peruvian music.
Yeah, and all of the Americas have been affected by the transatlantic slave trade, and so Peru was one of the places that enslaved Africans were brought, as well as Cuba. So there were a lot of parallels. Of course, all those enslaved Africans were coming from different areas of Western Africa, and so there are different populations, different ethnic groups. But there are some common denominators between clave-based music, between some of the Africanist aesthetics that are in all of American or Afro-American music, like call and response and vocals, like polyrhythms. All of those Africanist aesthetics are common denominators between those two styles. So even though the crowd wasn't familiar with our songs per se, they were familiar with what we were hearing and also what we were trying to invoke. So that was one thing that I was very surprised with. The second thing I was extremely surprised with in our first trip, and I'll show a picture of it, was the reaction that we got a chance to go to one of the best music schools I've ever had a part of, because the students are so awesome. The Conservatory of Jose White, which is in an old monastery. The monastery of St. Lazarus?
It was actually an old people's home.
Built
for poor people. Built in the early 19th century. These monasteries, un asilo de ancianos, which is an old people's home in Camagüey, named after St. Lazarus.
Yeah, and so I'm going to show this picture because this is, after one of our visits. Oh, let me actually share a screen here. Pardon my Zoom. We got to work with the students, and you'll see some of this in the videos that we'll be showing in just a second. But just to interact and to show not only Afro-Peruvian music, but our love for jazz. The students we would teach classes every time we would go, and we would spend time just interacting with them, and we just had a blast. Some of these students in this picture, because this was taken, 2015, have now since, become professional musicians. And Camagüey is actually known for being one of the best exporters of great musicians.
Mm-hmm. Camagüey, yes, it has picked up a reputation for producing good musicians, and there's hardly a good band in Cuba anywhere that does not have musicians from Camagüey.
Yeah. It's true. Actually, one of our good friends that we worked with on one of those trips, Ricardo Gonzalez, he won a show called La Banda Gigante, which is like American Idol. On Cuban television, they have like an American Idol type show, but it's for instrumentalists, including violins, violas, trumpet, trombone, and they would all compete, and have celebrity judges. And one of our friends actually won the show. And when I was hanging out with him in Havana, actually in March, he would get recognized on the street. He would be like, "Oh, it's Randy," they knew him, which was so great. Because coming from a smaller town, which and we feel this here in Madison. Sometimes there's no industry in Madison for musicians, and so we have to go to other places to get recognition. So it was so nice to see him kind of make it.
Well, he started in Camagüey working, playing with that provincial concert band, and he ended up going to Havana because just like musicians in Madison end up going to Chicago or New York or LA, same way, the opportunities abound in Havana, not in the interior, even a provincial capital. Camagüey produces the musicians, but they always, to really succeed, they have to move on and go to Havana. At some, like Alberto Alvarez is a great example, who's one of the great band leaders and composers of Cuban music, especially the salsa genre. Adalberto is from Camagüey, and he started his career in Camagüey. His father was the director of a very popular band in Camagüey named the Soneros de Camacho. But Adalberto, to make his career and to reach the level of success that he has achieved, he had to end up in La Habana.
Yeah, all great things go to La Habana.
And of course, we love Havana.
Oh, yeah. So, we could talk forever on this. So I'm going to move it along because we had our first two trips again in 2015 and then 2017 with Golpe Tierra. But when, after the success of those, Ricardo and I kind of put our heads together and trying to find a way of including more musicians and also just kind of growing this experience in a way. And so we had the luck of collaborating with the UW Jazz Department, Jazz Studies Department. And so we brought along for our 2019 trip, we created a U.S. Camagüey, U.S. Cuba big band, featuring some musicians from the UW Jazz Studies Department, including the director of that Jazz Studies, Johannes Wallman, Dr. Johannes Wallman. We also brought Matt Andrus on drums. We brought back Tony Barba because he just loved coming with us. And we brought Nat McIntosh on trombone. We also brought a well-known composer that used to live in Madison, is now kind of up in I believe, central Wisconsin, Paul Dietrich, and his wife, Jessica Jensen. Both are amazing trumpet players. Paul is a great big band composer and small group composer as well. And so we combined original big band compositions from Johannes Wallman and Paul Dietrich, as well as some kind of classic big band, standards. And for that trip, we collaborated with, and Ricardo already mentioned this band, but the provincial band of Camagüey that has been supported by the efforts of our sister city. And it's interesting because they have an offshoot of that band that is that plays kind of Latin jazz, kind of in the style of the great Benny Moré. And what do they call that band?
They actually named that band the Cardinal Club Jazz Band in honor of me and the Cardinal, and I'm really touched by that. And I think that's that it's another step. But you also forgot to mention Al Falashi.
Oh yeah, Al Falashi. How could I forget? From Fat Function, Al Falashi.
Yeah,
I'm gonna get an email.
He was a winner. He made a lot of friends down there, and people loved him. When he did his solo and he sang that fusion number that he did. That's what it was about. And we had sent the provincial band. We had sent them the arrangements beforehand, so they were prepared. They had rehearsed and they were ready. And when y'all came in, it just worked really well. And we were able to do 2 shows in a row. We ended up doing 3, I believe, but 2 shows in a row, and the first one didn't work out so well. The sound was just a huge problem.
That is one curveball that Cuba has, the sound systems, but it worked.
And it happens. I mean, in 2019, even then, still, they didn't have that much development, and certainly not in the provinces, where they would have the kind of sound system that we would expect in Havana or even here in Madison. But we we got through it, and then the next night we did it again, and it worked.
Yeah, we did it outside in the Plaza del Gallo.
And yes.
And actually, let me show a photo of that.
Yeah, that's a fantastic shot right there.
Yeah.
The Plaza del Gallo is like the center of Camagüey. The Plaza del Gallo, which is where it's a small plaza, but it has an open area where a couple of buildings that burned down. They decided to turn that area into a park, and they have concerts there, and to play there was a great honor for us, and it sounded wonderful. You opened up with a classic from the swing era, from the old Glenn Miller repertoire, In the Mood, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it just, that showed them, because that kind of music hadn't been heard in Cuba openly like that in 60 years, since the 50s. So that, that's the kind of thing that we've been able to do in Camagüey, which people say, how can you even get away with that? How can you do that? Well, we have built trust and respect with our Cuban friends. This is not a political thing. Cuba, it's very easy to get into politics when you deal with Cuba, but we have avoided that. Our project is about bringing people together.
Culture.
It's culture. It's educational. It's humanitarian, but it's about allowing the people of Camagüey and the people of Madison, Wisconsin, specifically, to get to know one another as citizens of their countries and as citizens of the world. And so far, we've done well.
Yeah. So I'm going to show a little vignette of, or basically kind of a quick cut of some of the experiences that we had on that big band trip. And I forgot Al Falashi, my apologies. I also forgot vocalist Megan Moran, who came along with that. So my apologies to Megan for that. She was the vocalist featured on Paul Dietrich's big band album as well. Mm-hmm. And so it seemed very appropriate that she would come and sing those songs. So I'm going to show a little bit of that video. And again, apologies for the editing. Actually, some of this is stuff we used when we came back, we were featured on, was it 15 News? They did a little story on this. So this is the quick cut, some of the video for this. So give me just a second and I'll share screen with everybody. And again, if there's any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat and we will be fed to those. All right. Does that Jose White?
Oh, sorry.
So
All right.
Great memories.
Yeah. Seemed like it brought back one when we were watching that.
Obviously, the big band project was in January of 2019. That's when we decided, instead of going in November, to go in January and make it more feasible for especially folks connected with the academic community here in Madison to be able to travel, and that was a good move. That was a good decision because we were able to take with us in 2019. We had 42 Madisonians, and counting the musicians. So our support group grew from 12 or 14 to 32 people.
Yeah.
And it would grow even more in 2020 when a group of them actually went to the Havana Jazz Fest following our Camagüey visit. So that was in 2020 was the last one that we did. And for that one, we just took acoplados. And the best thing about that was, of course, that we had a home. Yep. We were able to secure the El Circuito, which is a concept there that was begun by Julio Santana and Diana Rosa Perez, who they have been doing this video arts festival since 2008. And we began to support them on that and had helped them along with things like name tags and T-shirts and some lighting stuff. But they had taken over an old theater in Camagüey, an old movie house called El Cine Encanto, which was in shatters. And they had painstakingly restored this movie, this old movie house, into a concert hall and a home for their video arts project, the Center for the Development of New Mediums. And so that friendship and that relationship was significant.
Oh, yeah.
And it made it possible for us to have all of our events on the Camagüey Jazz 2020 at the Circuito.
Yep.
So we had a home that allowed us to do the rehearsals, and we had a technical team of.
We had a good sound guy.
We had a good sound guy. I mean, we went all out, and that was top notch. Yeah. That was the best. And of course, 2 months after that, COVID set in, and we've had to put everything on hold now.
Well, that's the thing. So after our big band experience, I didn't really think we could top that because it was such, we had brought more musicians, more people from the Madison community to experience that. We worked with and touched more musicians in Camagüey, Cuba as well, working with the provincial band and just some great musicians.
Well, this is the thing, is that the 2020, we decided to not just feature the exchange and the group Acoplados, which was coming down with us, but to engage other bands from Camagüey to give them a spot on the program. And so as it was, the Cardinal Club Jazz Band, Musicora, which is definitely worth of mention because Musicora is Camagüey's original jazz band of the new era. There were jazz bands back in the day, in the 50s and the 40s. Maestro Jorge Gonzalez, who was a noted musician from Camagüey, piano player, band director. He had his group back in the 50s and 40s, but not since there hadn't been any kind of a jazz group there until about the 1990s. And that was Musicora, which was, of course, very related to the folks there at El Circuito. So Musicora, and then the the Folclórico, the Ballet Folclórico de Camagüey had its own orchestra, which didn't get much recognition. And we decided, no, we want these guys. And lo and behold, they kind of stole the show.
They did, under the direction of the great Echemendia.
Did a great job.
And we'll show a little bit of that performance right at the end, so you can see kind of what they did. Because again, this was a festival that we basically created from the ground up with the blessing of the Ministry of Culture, in the people that make things happen in Camagüey. We collaborated with them to create what we call Camagüey Jazz 2020, and that was a major endeavor. And Matt, if anyone is watching this later in Cuba, our love and shout outs for all the people that made that event happen.
Exactly.
Especially at the folks at Circuito, because they opened their doors. It became our home. And instead of going to different spots in Camagüey to perform, we just performed there. And we did, now correct me if I'm wrong, I believe we did 4 nights of music.
We did 4 nights of music, and each one of those nights drew 200-300 people and more, because the capacity of the theater was over 400. And of course, they had a little bar in the corner and snacks. And we had, Golpe Tierra was able to perform as well, because we did a little jazz thing in the lobby. So it was just perfect.
Yeah. And not only did we feature, Cuban bands as well as bands from Madison and have that collaboration between those musicians, we also landed one of a big name to come in and close our festival on Saturday night. And at the same time, Ricardo, you'll remember that the Camagüey baseball team was doing pretty well in the playoffs.
Oh, yeah. When we got to Camagüey, they were the Cuban World Series was about to begin, and Camagüey was one of the 2 teams that made it, Camagüey and Matanzas. And that game, actually, it was not. It was the game on the night that we arrived there was Camagüey and Havana Industriales that were playing, and of course Camagüey won, and from there it went to the World Series.
And if hopefully you know about Cuban culture, that baseball is huge there, and so those towns, in Camagüey just shut down. They projected the game in the Plaza del Gallo, this main center, and everybody was out. You could hear like a pin drop while they were, before all the cheers and stuff. But it was just, and so one of our events happened, kind of after one of those playoffs games, and we had just one of the best crowds. And we landed, as I was alluding to, one of the biggest acts that comes from Camagüey,
which is Rumbata. Soy rumbero y qué. Rumbata is a very special group, and I don't know the whole history, but I can tell you this group has been together now for a good 20 years, I believe, or longer. And it is a group of dynamic, young performers. It's mixed. They have women and men, and they really have energy, and they have been able to achieve some recognition outside of Camagüey. They're known now in Havana. Pete, you mentioned Rumbata, and people know that they know of that group.
And they're known internationally, too. I was a fan of Rumbata before I even knew that they could do this festival. I had heard their music probably 10 years before that. And they were kind of known as kind of like the scrappy young group, playing kind of more, progressive style of rumba, a more modern style of rumba. So when I heard that we could collaborate with them and have them perform at this festival, it was a dream come true.
And our shout out to Wilmer Ferran. Wilmer for having welcomed us and worked with us, and that really closed the show, as they say in Spanish, con broche de oro, with a golden pin, and of course we had another night. Then after those 4 shows, we then had another night at the famous Casa de la Trova in Camagüey, which is a wonderful space. It's a nightclub, but out in the open, and as long as it doesn't rain, but it's a wonderful spot, and it's our favorite place to hang out in Camagüey.
And for me, as a geek of Cuban music history, just to play at a Casa de la Trova, like that is always just an amazing experience. The Casa de la Trova in Santiago de Cuba is probably one of the homes of son music.
It's sacred ground.
Yeah, sacred ground. So to play at any type of Casa de la Trova for me is an amazing experience. So I'm going to show a little video, just again a little clip, some clips of that 2020 Camagüey Jazz. And I do see a couple. We're being fed a couple questions. So after the video, we're going to do. We'll show one last kind of performance of the Ballet Folklórico de Camagüey, their special performance that they put together for this. And then we'll open it up for questions from you, the viewers. So here we go. And again, pardon my technical savviness here. Let's see. Here we go. Yeah. Oh, we're lagging a little bit.
Ahora me toca a mí presentar una banda que es muy especial para mí aquí en Camagüey. Después de ellos les va a hacer...
This is us back at the Jose White Conservatory. Us teaching Afro-Peruvian rhythm to the community. just for the sake of time, we'll move on. But yeah, so it gets an idea of just a kind of vignette of what our Camagüey Jazz 2020 was. And I should acknowledge the musicians that came along with us on that trip. As Ricardo mentioned, we brought the Madison-based group, Acoplados, which you can hear tonight at the Garver Feed Mill if you're watching this live. And that band does consist of many of the same members of Golpe Tierra. It's just a larger ensemble. And again, Acoplados plays music from all over the African diaspora. And our own kind of arrangements of those tunes. So that band, we brought Aaron Gotchberg on percussion, on drums, I'm sorry, and we brought Yorel Lashley on percussion. Nat McIntosh came back for more with us. Tony Barba, our MVP in the horn section. We brought, again, Juan Tomas Martinez and Richard Hilder and myself. And then we were very fortunate to land one of the rising stars in the Spanish music scene, Enriquito Rodriguez, the great trumpet player that is a friend of Juan Tomas from a different band. And we were very fortunate that last minute he decided to kind of come along with us. And that was an amazing experience because his sound was not only perfect for what we were doing, but he was also a very generous person with his knowledge of flamenco and other styles of Latin jazz.
Yes. And he, of course, he flew all the way from Spain to Miami to Camagüey. So it was a roundabout, but we were very fortunate to have Enriquito.
So I am going to show one last thing before we get to our questions. Actually, let's get to one question first before we get to this last video. So we're seeing that the question is, although music is prominent for the Camagüey trip, could you speak to the variety of artistic endeavors that are present in Camagüey?
Well, there's a lot of music going on and dance in Camagüey. Starting with the question was artistic expression,
artistic endeavors. Yeah,
endeavors. Yeah. Starting with the Ballet de Camagüey, which is a internationally recognized ballet company. It was the second city in Cuba to have its own ballet company which was founded by Fernando Alonso, who's a relation of the great Alicia Alonso. May she rest in peace. And there's also, well, of course, Rumbata. There's Musicora, which is a Latin jazz, heavy brass sound group, but it's very, very. They can do a brassy jazz sound, and then they can turn around and do a soft ballad from the Beatles playbook. So Musicora is a multi-talented jazz group, about 8 pieces. There's of course, the provincial concert band has been established since 1919. It's an old institution, but it serves as a school because it takes in those folks who graduate from the music conservatory, and they can perform in the band, and there's like a revolving door where they get to practice, and then out of that band will come out, well, it came the 22-piece jazz band, but also they have like a saxophone quartet, and there's also a chamber orchestra in Camagüey that we have had a relationship with over the years, have supported them. I mean, when you're talking about support, we're not talking about financial support, but in a way it is, because we'll bring like strings for the guitars, which are difficult. We'll bring reeds for the other, the wind instruments. And over the years, that adds up to a lot of support. And there was the Camagüey Contemporary Ballet, which I don't know if it's still organized, but it may very well be. It's the Modern Contemporary Ballet of Camagüey, which is really good. And they have performed under the direction of famed dancer Pedro Ruiz Jr., who used to be with Ballet Hispánico. And Pedro is a Cuban-American, and he has gone to Camagüey repeatedly and helped to organize this contemporary ballet. And they have performed, they came to New York at Hunter College. They performed back in 2019. So there's those are the few that come to mind right away. There used to be a jazz group also called Maracu Jazz,
Yeah.
but I don't know if they're still together. I think that group dissolved. So
And there's new collaborations, new bands forming all the time.
all the time.
And not
Yes.
only in kind of instrumental music, but I've been hearing it in electronica as well, DJs,
Yes.
hip hop, but also just walking the streets of Camagüey. It's a very artistic city. There's art galleries, there are murals, there are statues. It is just it's artistic.
And let's not forget, there are several traditional song groups in Camagüey, like Son Entero,
Mhm.
Son Ire,
Which
which
we
is
had
a
at our
young
festival.
group, which they perform. Actually, I knew I'd forgotten
Yeah.
somebody, and I'm so sorry, Harold and Patricia, because Son Ire is
Amazing.
a very amazing young group. This is traditional son music. And of course, there's the Soneros de Camacho, which after the passing of their original leader, Nene Alvarez, Alberto Alvarez's father, they have gone a little bit more modern sound, just a little bit more electronic equipment influence, but still the same good sound of Cuban son.
Yeah, well, actually. And if there are more questions out there, we would love to answer them. We don't know if you're out there yet. So if you want to let us know that you're out there, or maybe if there's any participants that have come along with us and want to share their experience in the chat, we will definitely highlight that. But we are kind of coming up on the end of our hour. And Ricardo, I want to thank you for your time, and not only thank you for your time, but also thank you for your vision on making this project happen. It was, for me as a musician, it was a dream come true. I talked earlier about kind of paying that check, paying that tab that I had from all those musicians that were so generous with their knowledge. And just a little short story. At the end of our Camagüey Jazz concert, our big concert, I didn't know this at the time, and had I known, I would have been extremely nervous. But I'm a big fan of the style of music called timba out of Cuba. And one of the all-time favorite groups is called Manolito y su Trabuco.
Another Camagüeyano.
Exactly. And he had actually, I saw him in the States. They played in Chicago to a half-packed house. It was actually pretty sad. I thought it was going to be, but yeah, they were coming through, and I guess not as well known in the States, but if you are a fan of just music in general, check out Manolito y su Trabuco. And at the end of the night, he was in the audience. And he
Yes.
stopped me and told me that he liked my band, and that for me was just the creme de la creme.
Well, and another thing is Manolito Simone has made it possible through he has capitalized a new recording studio in Camagüey, Estudios Caonao, and that had just began to take shape as COVID set in. So that project is suspended, but waiting.
Yeah.
And so our objective, when we do go back, it's not an if we go back, it's when we'll go back. It may not be this year, definitely not this year, maybe in 2022, but definitely January 2023. And we got to be thinking long term now, because COVID is such a insidious thing. But there is a potential to record, to go there, have arrangements brought into Camagüey so they can start rehearsing and be prepared so that we can get down there and do a recording session for posterity. And that'll be the next thing. And there'll always be announcements about some of these projects and future travel to Cuba.
Yeah, and before we wrap up with our last video, I just want to say that too. Obviously, thanking Ricardo for his time and sharing this knowledge, but also just a kind of a call to action out there to to make sure that this is a cultural experience, but one of the big thing that impedes this experience and this exchange is our country's politics, the blockade for Cuba, and so just if you are just calling people to make sure that they know that their votes do count, and that we need to put pressure on our politicians to really end this
the embargo on Cuba, and the current policy of the U.S. toward Cuba is harming people down there. It's keeping food from people's table, and that cannot happen. The United States cannot be responsible for that. That people argue this back and forth, and you can do that. You're entitled to opinions, but what we're not entitled to is to have a policy that results in hurting the Cuban families, and that is what is happening now. And it's time to bring an end to that and to facilitate the exchange between Cubans and Americans, which is so necessary now, now more than ever. So if you're listening and you appreciate and sympathize with what we're doing, call your congressman, leave a message, send him an email or her, and say, I'm just see an end to this policy of embargo and isolation of Cuba. The time has come, and we have to do it. So, and thank you, Nick, for allowing me to come on this Zoom exchange.
Can we be done with Zoom after this?
I really appreciate what you've done, because you are a leader in this community, in the jazz community of Madison, among musicians, and you have this Madison Jazz Festival that is going on right now until Sunday is a wonderful, wonderful continuation of the old Isthmus Jazz Fest, but it's a much more expanded, much more community-based, and that is thanks to you and your efforts with a lot of the other folks, because Madison has a real vibrant jazz community.
It does.
And Latin music is part of that, because Latin and jazz are related. They're cousins in the music world. And thank you, and hello, and goodbye, and regards to all of our friends who might be watching us and listening to us.
So we're going to watch this last video, and my apologies, we're on the Wi-Fi here at Garverfito, so it might be a little laggy, but we just wanted to highlight this performance. It was from the Ballet Folklórico de Camagüey. That was one of our Noche Cubana. It was our night that we were featuring Cuban bands only, with collaboration with the Madison musicians. And they put together a very special show, as Ricardo mentioned, and it was all jazz-based, and showing, again, because, jazz and Cuban music are the same music in a lot of ways. I mean, there would be no jazz without Afro-Cuban music. And so their presentation really drove that point home. And they were doing the classic Gershwin tune, Summertime. But you'll hear it in a very different way. And what they're using are these drums that are played in the rhythm of comparsa. There's these little small drums that different members will hold. And you can hear them use this comparsa rhythm to back up Summertime. And comparsa itself is very specific to the Camagüey area. The African ethnic groups in Camagüey brought this comparsa to the forefront. So this is what we'll end with. It is Summertime. And again, sorry if it's a little laggy, but if you do have any questions, it's not too late. We'll play this video, and then we'll give you a final goodbye. So here we go. Where did it go? There it is. You'll notice those drums in the back is what I was mentioning, comparsa.
el conjunto folclórico de Camagüey.
Yeah. And shout out to Geraldine Gallardo, that was the vocalist that you just heard. And shout out to all the great Cuban musicians out there. I hope you caught this on YouTube and you're in the Wi-Fi and the parks. And we miss you. We will see you again. Also, wanted to give a shout out to all the people who come along, the Madisonians that have come along on these trips, and given their support, and just making these connections in life is so important. We just need, I mean, as we know now after COVID, it's that interpersonal connection that really is our humanity. It's what keeps us alive. So thank you to all those folks. And again, this is thanks to Art Lit Lab for hosting this event, for kind of taking a chance on this event. And we were really happy to do it. This has been a part of the Madison Jazz Festival. And one last time, if you can give them a round of applause at home.
Yes.
Round of applause for Ricardo Gonzalez.
And I'd like to respond. There's a comment.
There is a comment
with a question. Yes, the Madison Camagüey has a page on Facebook, Madison Camagüey, all one word, I guess. And so look it up, Madison Camagüey, in Facebook, and you'll come to that page. And whenever there's a next trip, we will promote it there, and it'll be the talk of the town. We'll have it. It'll be easy to find out. So this person. Is there a way for viewers to get involved? Well, definitely stay tuned. Write us at that. You can also contact Madison Camagüey at gmail.com. Madison Camagüey, that's CAMAGUEY at gmail.com.
Or just come out and talk to us. We're going to be here tonight at the Garber Feed Mill with Acoplados. We're going to be dancing the night away. So if you're catching this live, just put on your dancing shoes and come find us.
All right.
Yeah. All right. With that,
thanks.
We'll bid you adieu. And on behalf of the Arts and Literature Laboratory and the Madison Jazz Festival, I want to thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.